All right, my gun must be okay. I got all that stuff ready. Ready on that. All right, they're ready on that. All right. Father, we ask to just find people with open eyes and open ears. Today is Wednesday, October 19th. This is my little Bible study, and we're continuing with our study in the book of Exodus. We're in chapter 12, but we're going to take a little sidetrack through chapter 4 Deuteronomy here. And well, let me get on chapter 4 Deuteronomy. All right. Yeah, sometimes it does. All right. Okay, now we're in chapter 12, all right? Chapter 12 begins law, the law section in the book of Exodus. Okay, the first law that we're going to talk about is the law of the Passover. Now, in the common Christian doctrine today in churches, you'll find, when it comes to law, you'll find many churches that tell you that there's absolutely nothing to do with the law anymore, that Christ abolished the law on the cross. Well, let's just see what the Bible actually says about that. Now, there are some things that are covered under the law that was covered under the cross, and because of the covenant of the cross, there's no more blood sacrifice.
Yeah,
that's of course one thing of them.
Yeah.
That's part of what was actually covered. But let's just talk about law in general, because law isn't just about sacrifices. Law was something that is common. They had the same types of law that we have today. They have civil law, they have criminal law. You had law of conduct between, like, the Levitical priests had their own book, Leviticus, where it had taught them how to conduct themselves as priests and things like that. So there's a lot of law. There's a lot to the law. Most of the time when you hear the words like commandment, judgment, my ordinance, and words like that, those are all words that pertain to law. Okay, so when law covers under a lot of different words, you're not going to say law. You know, this is my statute, this is my ordinance, and all those are words that refer to law. All right, in general, we put all those words together and then stick it under one big English word, L-A-W, law. All right. And like I said, some of these laws don't apply anymore, like anything to do with bloodletting, circumcision, sacrifices, the way the temple was ran, expiation through sacrifices, all those things, the tithing set, right? All those things were part of the Old Testament canon as far as the way the temple was ran and part of the Levitical set. But here in Deuteronomy, Moses, I like Deuteronomy when it comes to law, because Deuteronomy is called sometimes the second law, but it doesn't mean it's the second law. It's the second telling, right? Because in the book of Exodus, where we are, and when we get to the Mount Sinai, we're going to get the law at Mount Sinai, right? And after they do, then they don't get to go in the promised land, and we have the book of Numbers, and then at the end of the book of Numbers is where the book of Deuteronomy comes in, and this is Moses again telling the law to the people just before we go there. And oddly enough, it's Moses here that, It's Moses, everybody thinks about Moses being this old school guy, but it's Moses that first starts talking about circumcision of the heart over the flesh. All right, he mentions it over and over in the book of Deuteronomy. All right, that's just something to kind of think about. Now, he also in the book of Deuteronomy leaves out a lot of the Levitical law that applies to the Levites, because they're just not talking about them. He's talking about common people and the common law then, and that's one of the reasons I like the book of Deuteronomy when it's really talking about law. Go see what it says, because most of those laws are ones that still pertain. And if you read it, you'll see exactly what I mean by it. But here in chapter 4, he's reminding them of some things about the law, and I want you to listen to what he says about that. All right? Chapter 4, verse 1. Now, therefore, hearken, O Israel, unto the statutes and unto the judgments which I teach to you for to do them, that ye may live and go in and possess the land which the Lord God your father has given to you. This word hearken is an interesting word, because it means to hear, but it means to hear intelligently. So he not just wants you to listen.
Pay attention.
Yeah, he wants you to pay attention and understand what each one of these laws means, okay? Verse 2, you shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did because of Baal Peor. For all the men that follow Baal Peor, the Lord thy God hath destroyed them from among you. All right, and this is a rebellion that we'll get around to. All right, but yet that did, but ye that did cleave unto the Lord your God, you are alive, every one of you this day. All right, so God's faithful. If you stay faithful to Him, He will stay faithful to you. It's very important, particularly as it pertains to people that actually occupy the earth in the last days. All right? It's very important. If you don't bear the mark of the beast, well, you're sitting good with God, period. No matter what you've done. That's the one thing that can cause you to just completely piss away your Christian card, is bearing the mark of the beast in the last days when the Antichrist appears. All right, and then we've mentioned over and over correlations between Exodus and Revelation. There's more coming. It doesn't stop. It keeps going. All right. Where did I stop? Verse 4? That's right. Verse 5. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should do so in the land, whether you go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them. All right? Two things. Keep them and do them. All right? Now, one of the major faults in Christian doctrine today is they don't teach much law. All right? When you start talking about biblical law, most people have no idea. Their concept of biblical law is the Ten Commandments. Yeah. Right? Well, we're going to go in the book of Exodus, where he's on Sinai. He's up on the mountain for 40 days, Moses is with God. And when he comes back out, you mean to tell me the only thing they can knock out is 10 Commandments? Yeah. All right. So there was a lot more that happened on the mountain, my point, than just 10 Commandments, all right? Now, once we'll get back to the law of Passover. That begins the written laws. But let's go on with this, what it says, all right? Now, there's a reason for this law. Keep, therefore, and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations. All right? What he's saying is, you keep my laws, and I will bless you so greatly as a people that other nations will simply be envious of you. All right? Which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is wise and a wise and understanding people. Verse 7. For what nation is there so great, who have God so nigh unto them, as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for? Verse 8. And what nation is there so great that hath statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? Take heed to yourself, keep thy soul diligent, lest ye forget these things. Hi, sweetheart. Which thine eyes have seen, and lest they depart from the heart and all thy days of thy life, but teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons. Specifically today, that the Lord stood before God, or that thou stoodest before the Lord thy God in Horeb, when the Lord said unto me, gather my people together, and I will make them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me, which means reverence, not necessarily fear, all the days that they shall live upon the earth, and they shall teach, or that they may teach their children. All right, now listen, does that sound like anything? Was Moses de-emphasizing anything about the law? No. That's my point. All right, Moses is inferring here in Deuteronomy chapter 4 that the way people want to know how to please God, all right? The way you please God is by keeping his law. All right? If you don't break his law, this is very important. And the reason why, let's just go to Matthew here. We're going to go to the New Testament now because we spend a lot of time here. Let's go to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to pick it up in verse 17. We're going to pick it up in 17. All right. Now, people say that Christ changed the law. All right. But let's see what Christ had to say about it. And he happened to have a little bit to say about it in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. All right. Listen to what he says about the law. Think not that I'm come to destroy the law or the prophets. I'm not come to destroy, but to fulfill. He said, for verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, not one jot nor tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Okay, not one jot and one tittle. A jot and a tittle is a comma and an accent mark. All right? And he said he doesn't change one jot, one sound of any letter of the law. That's real important. All right? And in fact, in 1 John chapter 3, you find out that sin, he says, well, here, let's just see what it says. I'll tell you what it says about it. I'll mess it up if I... 1 John chapter 3. 4. All right. Now look and listen to what it says about it. Verse 4. Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law. For sin is transgression of the law. Okay, just flat out. All right. Now, not just thou shalt not kill. All right. That's one of the 10 Commandments, right? Well, it's thou shalt do no murder is what it really says. When you go to the law then, in the books of the law, you find out what the difference is between homicide, criminal homicide, manslaughter. Was it an accident? You go here to murder, a manslayer. It's the law of the manslayer. All right. Two men are working in the woods, they're neighbors, and the axe slippeth from the heave and kills his neighbor in the head. Said these people had no quarrel before. There's no reason to think that this man would kill them intentionally. It's an accident. All right? But if the man lays in wait and hides and premeditates and kills a man in cold blood, that's murder. And so there's a big difference.
But there's a gray spot in between there. If the person walks in on his wife in bed with another man and he kills that man, it's a crime of passion.
That's a passion, right. That's a little bit different, right. Because he didn't
be forgiven.
Okay, that's right. Now, okay, the reason why is he didn't premeditate. Say, I'm having an affair with your girlfriend. All right? Okay, look, you just think about this.
No, it's still punishable.
No, it's still punishable. It's not the same as murder, though. It's not the same as first-degree murder. Because the penalty for first-degree murder is death.
Death, yeah.
Is the death penalty.
The penalty for manslaughter
but it's not death.
It's like 10 years.
Well, it depends on. Well, it
what
depends.
It is, yeah.
What happened with the manslayer? You'd have to go to the Levites, the priests, who were also the judges in one of the Levitical cities because they didn't have land, and they would hear your case and they would decide then. Now, if you were found innocent, well, or if you're found guilty of like manslaughter, like I was going to say, I was having an affair with your girlfriend, you walk in, you lose your mind, you didn't plan to it, but you just grab a gun and shoot me and her in the head. All right, now you're guilty of killing 2 people. All right, but you didn't plan to do it. You didn't premeditate. You didn't lie in wait.
There was no hatred in your heart.
You just walked in on something that caused you to lose your mind.
Yep.
Now, you're still going to go to jail, but you're not guilty of murder, and there's a big difference. Now, murder's forgivable too when you get down to it. Murder is forgivable, but it has to be forgiven by God. And when you go after you've been killed, you have to deal with the person you've killed. That's the greatest witness against murder is the person that died. So that's where that actually gets squared. But the penalty is actually death for a murder. And see, a lot of this is not talking about in church because that's some pretty gruesome stuff. And a lot of good people don't like to hear good gruesome stuff in the middle of a happy church. But I'm a Bible guy. I like the way it goes with the Bible, all right? Now, in fact, in the book of Galatians in chapter 3, verse 24, it says that the law is actually a schoolmaster, then it leads you before the feet of Christ. Because of your awareness of the law, then you understand that you've committed a sin and therefore repent.
You have
you understand what I'm saying?
If you're ignorant of that sin, you
until you're accountable of the law, right? It also goes on to say, right, until there's a law, there's no sin committed. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Until God says don't, it's not a sin. Yeah. But at one point he says don't, then it becomes a sin. And that has happened because like Genesis is full of a couple of incest accounts, right, that weren't counted as sins, but later it becomes a sin whenever Israel grows to a greater size. Some of these laws then come into existence in the book of Leviticus and the book of Numbers, like the ones we're talking about out here. But nonetheless, the book of Galatians says it's a schoolmaster, and that's why, because once you're aware of the law, then you understand that you sin. Now, the way to keep God happy with you individually is to simply follow His law. Now, it's these promises were made that we were just talking about before to them as a nation, but it goes down to an individual, no matter where they stand. You can stand in the heart of Babylon and still receive, God's grace. Look at Daniel. We talked a lot about Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach, all of them. All Israel that went like God told them to do had a good time in Babylon. They weren't really they weren't hurting at all.
Nothing,
right. And the ones that did what God said and submitted to Babylon stayed there in Jerusalem, stayed in their homes and all that. The ones that fought died, like Hezekiah, the king, saw his children all put to death, and then his eyes were gouged out, and he died in Babylon. Another thing a lot of people don't like talking about in church, that's some tough stuff, dude.
Kill all your kids.
Yeah, he killed every one of his kids.
We're going to kill you in another town.
The whole tribe of Judah, the male lineage from the tribe of Judah was wiped out in front of Hezekiah's face. His children, his own sons.
All his kids.
Right, all because he disobeyed. But nonetheless, there's where we are with that. Now, so the law, what I'm getting at, the law really applies. And the first way to learn the law is actually going through it like we're getting ready to do. So with that, let's go back to the book of Exodus then, and let's get on with what we're here to actually do, which is study the book of Exodus. All right? Let me get a drink. I can put all this away. No, I can't because we got some more stuff to talk about. But anyway. All right, now I'm going to explain this as we go. All right, so here in the book of Exodus, we've already through, God has dismantled all the Egyptian gods. You know, the plagues of Egypt, okay, they weren't just plagues. All right, what it is a systematic dismantling of all the gods of Egypt. All right, the water gods were with the frogs, like that.
The water turning to blood.
The water turning to blood. The attack on Pharaoh, we're going to talk about as the firstborn of Pharaoh, was the main god in Egypt. He was the incarnation of the original Pharaoh. And he was the reason the universe spun around the earth or whatever, so, and each one of these attacks, if it's not a personal one like lice and boils and flies and things like that, it's an actual attack on different deity types. The locust, there was a group of Egyptian gods called seraphim that were locust chasers. So the locust coming means that the locust chasers were defeated. The frogs coming means that the frog gods were defeated.
The hail destroying
the
cattle and
the cattle who were gods and God figures and God types.
The god of the field,
right, of all the
wheat,
fields,
the rye, and the barley.
All these things.
Really interesting.
So these things aren't necessarily just plagues to hurt something. It's actually dismantling the deity system in ancient Egypt.
Yeah, the religious system in ancient Egypt.
And here in chapter 12, we're here to the last of the deities right now, which is with Pharaoh.
Plagues?
No, there's altogether there's 10.
10.
Yeah, altogether, yeah. All right, now, where were we? Chapter 12, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. All right. Initially, this month is called Abib. All right, and later it's going to be changed to Nisan. All right, but whether it's called Abib or whether it's called Nisan, they both begin on the spring equinox, on the first day of spring. All right. People who study and follow God are children of the light. It takes about 10 minutes in the Newer to Old Testament to run that idea, which we've done a couple times, as being children of the light. So they watched the sun, all right? And they understood that the precession of the equinox is how if you stood in one spot, you could watch the sunrise and it would move. And at this end over here, it's cold, as it's going to be, and at this end over here, it's going to be hot. Be easy to count and find the midpoint, which is the two equinoxes, was spring equinox and then the vernal equinox, right? All right. These people followed the spring equinox. They're not the Hebrews were not the only ones that followed that worked around the solar calendar, all right? But they were one of the main ones. All right, so like I said, whether it's Abib or whether the month is called Nisan, it doesn't matter. It begins on the first day of spring. Spring equinox is day 1. All right. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month thou shalt take to them every man a lamb, according to his house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. And all that means on the 10th day, then, after the 10th day of spring, 10 days later, when the sun goes down, you pick one of your best.
Okay.
Yeah, first year, it's going to have a spot on it, can have a blemish on it. All right, and you separate it out. At that point, the tradition, and this is not biblical, but the tradition is that they take this lamb into the home and baby it, clean it, take care of it, treat it like a pet. All right, because it has a special purpose. Verse 4, And if the house be too little for the lamb, let the man and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shalt thou make the count for the lamb. So if you only have you and your wife, and a big lamb, a full year lamb is too much for you, join with your neighbor, and then count for everybody in one group. And the point is because at the end, you can't have anything left over, which we'll get to here in just a minute. All right. Verse 5. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, because either one was acceptable for a Passover sacrifice. If you were a goat herder, you might only have goats.
Yes.
But either one, both are clean and both were acceptable for Passover sacrifice. 6. And you shall keep it until the 14th day at the same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. All right. So we're 14 days from the spring equinox. All right. When the sun goes down, the entire nation would kill the Passover lamb at the same time. All right. Each man according to their eatings, and each one in their own home. All right. Verse 7. And they shall take the blood and strike it on the two sides of the post and the upper doorpost of the house, wherein they shall eat it. All right. Now this meal is a holy meal. Okay. It's a very holy meal, and at this point now for us as Christians, a Passover dinner is just a good dinner. You got to realize that the sacrifice part of this is done for us, but the same blood that was struck here on the doorposts in the land of Egypt represents the same blood as Christians that causes the death angel to pass over in the last days. All right. So it's the same thing that we're talking about, and that's why Passover becomes so important. Passover, and despite what a lot of Christians will tell you, there's 3 feasts. You'll find that there are 3 feasts. All right? Each one of them all 3 of them represent this entire age. The first one is the plan of redemption. The first one is Passover. We're going to find that Christ was actually crucified on the Passover, or just before the Passover. All the law that we're going to study was fulfilled with him during the crucifixion, and including the fact that none of his bones could be broken. All right? All the laws of Passover followed with the resurrection. All right. Now I wanted to lose where I was. All right. It's the same blood, like I said. It's the same miracle that here. We're going to find out exactly who that has to pass over. Verse 8, and they shall eat the flesh. What do I say about that? As a Christian doctrine, the thing that's left out of this that's holy remains communion. All right? That was the thing that we're going to talk about in Matthew here in just a little bit. That he did at the Last Supper. You remember the thing at the Last Supper? Well, it's not the Passover feast that they're attending. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. Let's just get on with this. All right. And thou shalt eat the flesh in that night, roasted with fire, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not it raw, nor sodden it with water, but roast it with fire, the head with the legs, and with prudence thereof. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until morning, and that which remaineth until morning ye shall burn it with fire. Right? So they consider this to be a very holy dinner.
So what was left?
Right. Anything that was left, it wasn't allowed to be scavenged. Yeah. It wasn't allowed to be leftovers for the next day. It was completely destroyed as a part of that honor of the Passover. All right. Now you cannot emphasize enough the fact. Well, let's find out who. Let's just find out who it is. Yeah, let's just keep going. Verse 11. And thus shall you eat it, with your loins girded, and your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. Now, this term, to gird yourself, we've talked about this before. This is an expression of war, right? It means to reach down, you then grab your skirt, pull it up, stick it in your belt,
get ready for
battle. Get your legs out, because you're going to need to fight. All right? With your shoes on, another commandment, staff in hand. So, the Passover is not, I don't know how to put it, it's not a peaceful thing, really. And when we get into what happens, you'll really see.
They're eating it battle ready. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, they're eating it
now,
ready to go.
There's a reason for the leavening, right? For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and I will smite all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment, just like we were talking about. All right? So it's really the focus. Remember, we've talked about this, I am the Lord, to finish up that verse. We talked about this before. The reason for it wasn't just just to show you I'm strong thing. The whole point of it was to show the Egyptians that the gods that they're worshiping were fake.
Yeah.
Right. Because he wanted the Egyptians to understand that he was God as well. Israel's his. He was going to redeem them.
Israel already
right, right. He's going to redeem them. But he wanted Egypt to understand that he was. And he begins to work, or you're going to find out. All right? But it's against, not just against the people, but it's against the judgment of the gods of Egypt as well. Verse 13, and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the house where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. This term Passover means to hop or to skip. All right? It also means the festival of the victim, which is kind of interesting within itself. Right. to pass over you, and the plagues shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. All right. On this day, what does it say? And on this day shall be unto you a memorial that ye shall keep the feast of the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep the feast by an ordinance forever. All right. Now, I don't know what to tell you about that, but this is law, and that just said that means now, because we're a part of forever. Now, there's a problem with this, is that in Christian doctrine, we can get confused sometimes, because we've had so much history, and I'm going to cover this real good. Let's just finish up this part of this law, because there's something else I wanted to bring in, and then we'll get to what I'm talking about. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your house. All right. Now leaven represents, well, it makes bread rise, but it represents sin. Anytime you find it in the Bible, it's going to represent sin. All right. Beware of the leavening of the Pharisees. You should know this from church.
Rising of the Pharisees.
Yeah, the rising of the Pharisees.
I get it.
All right. It means sin, except in one spot in the parable where it can mean God's Spirit. But most of the time, it's almost always means sin. So, like, the best one is beware of the rising or the leavening of the Pharisees. You ever said your righteousness has to exceed that of the scribes and the Pharisees? Well, and beware of their rising. So, there's a lot within that when you really get to start breaking it down. All right. And then the first day, let's go on a little bit farther. And in the first day, there shall be a holy convocation. And the seventh day shall be a holy convocation. The first day, this is how you calculate the Sabbath, the real Sabbath, not the Sunday one, not the Saturday thing that they argue about. There's a reason why it says that it warns people who make the Sabbath the day of the week. And this is why. Right here, we're talking about the Abib. You should have the first day of Abib, which is the spring equinox, first day of spring. 14 days later, when the sun goes down, the Passover sacrifice was made.
That's when the sacrifice was made.
Now the first day of the feast starts. When the sun goes down, starts the new day. That's where the Hebrews people started their new day, was at sundown. So 14th day at sundown, it's called the high Sabbath. And that's not Sunday. It's not any of that. It's whatever day of the week it is.
So spring equinox is the longest day of the year.
This year, the 14th day was a Sunday, so that means on Sunday when the sun goes down, Sabbath actually begins for the year.
So it's Monday.
That's what sets it for the year. It was a spring equinox, not our Gregorian calendar that runs off the lunar cycle, not the solar cycle. And that's one of the reasons it's off. Because we had these people with the solar cycle, then you had a Julian calendar, then you had the Gregorian calendar, and then we standardized the Gregorian calendar. So our holidays compared to the vernal equinox and the spring equinoxes are just way out of whack. I mean, after you do all that. But the way to do it is just find spring, count 14 days, then when the sun goes down, that's when the high Sabbath is. There's a Sabbath every 7 days after that, and that's what this is talking about. That means that the Passover is actually bookended by 2 Sabbaths. One begins the Passover with no unleavened bread, and the last one you can have leavened bread, and you can have leavened bread on it. But it ends with the whole time of the Passover. All right, and you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for it is the selfsame day I have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day in all your generations by an ordinance forever. Again, second time, forever. And forever includes now. All right. I'm going to stop right there on 18, and I want to go and talk a little bit about another group who were sun watchers. All right. Now, there were a lot of deities from Babylon, the greater Mesopotamian region through history that were sun watchers. One of them was a particularly nasty one, well, several of them, but one of them was named Ishtar. All right. Now, Ishtar is an ancient Babylonian fertility goddess. All right, and she's quite a girl. Every lover that she ever took was killed for following her, through her mythology, through her history. She's recognized as the goddess of fertility, the goddess of war, the goddess of love. She goes by the name Ishtar, Anuna, and Isis in Egypt. All right, so this dismantling, part of this dismantling has to do with her as well. Well, started fighting back, Ishtar, because the root word for Ishtar that we understand in the Bible is the word Easter. Okay, and that Easter, you can hear it in Ishtar. Okay, you hear the word Easter, right? Now, you can get online and you can get Easter eggs all you want, and you can find all kind of baloney about
That's
how
all
it's just
representation
loving
of fertility.
Jesus and happy and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But eggs in a fertility basket are rabbits and eggs are two of the most ancient symbols of fertility on the planet. All right. So what happened was, instead of keeping the Passover, early church people were looking at these people that had a festival at the same time as Passover. 14 days later on spring equinox, these people have one on the spring equinox. All right? And what Ishtar was, and part of it was on spring equinox, they got all loaded on anything they wanted, and they had a big orgy in the woods and everywhere. All right? And it was probably a good selling point for younger teenage people, all right? But nonetheless, that's really what it was. And it was built into part of their culture. Humans have a gestation period of about 9 months, right? A little bit longer than 9 months. Any woman's ever been pregnant will tell you that. But a lot of other animals that you see along spring don't have one quite that long. They're a matter of weeks to a few months and things like this. So think about this. They have this feast on the first, and where they celebrate fertility with this big old orgy. And then as spring continues, things start to have start to have children. And then at the end of that cycle, then the women then begin to birth children along the 9-month cycle. It wouldn't take long for religion to begin to develop out of that along with the pagan people, just because they could see a connection with the cycle.
The cycle, yeah.
And then it wouldn't take long for them to convince themselves that maybe they had a little bit something to do with the cycle. And that has a lot to do with Ishtar and how they function. Now, part of Ishtar, part of the temple rites of Ishtar is that you had to present yourself at the temple of Ishtar as a prostitute, male or female. Okay? And that was part of your duty as a participation of Ishtar to help support the temple. And you can imagine them, I mean, you got the Thatcher's daughter that you might have, and this is all for sale. So the Thatcher's daughter might have one price, but what about the senator's daughter? I mean,
what about the Thatcher?
Right. What about the Thatcher? Right. And I want to cover something that has to do with that. And it's a little bit of law. Let me find where I wrote it down. There it was. Deuteronomy 23, 17, 19. All right, that's what it was. That's a hard one to remember all the time. Why don't you listen to what it says? 23, 19. All right, so, we're talking about Ishtar, all right, and we're talking about Passover and then the relationship between the two. All right, listen to what it says in 19. Thou shalt not win, in 18. Thou shalt not bring the hire of a whore or the price of a dog unto the house of the Lord thy God for any vow, all right, for even both these are abominations unto the Lord thy God. The price of a whore, that's an easy one. We're talking about prostitution. He's talking about temple prostitution like with the Nunan, with the star, with all. We're talking about an established kind of a ritualistic prostitution kind of thing that's actually going on. And now the price of a dog, male and female. It said male or female. Okay, the price of a dog. You get a lot of people who raise dogs that get the bad rap here. Some preachers say, well, it's because dogs are an unclean animal and God doesn't want you tithing them, but that's not true. That's not true. Even the asses were redeemed and coming out of Egypt as far as that goes, as far as tithing goes. But the price of a dog has nothing to do with the dog, but it does have to do with the male prostitute and it's how he presents himself. If you notice the subject of what's going on is here, thou shalt not be a whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel. Thou shalt not bring for a hire of a whore or the price of a dog into the house of the Lord thy God for any vow. He doesn't want prostitution money. He doesn't want it from a man or from a woman, and that's what the price of the dog is all about.
Gotcha.
It's the male prostitute. And that's what's being addressed there. So he said, I don't want that kind of thing going on.
No, we don't need
separate
that.
yourself.
You don't need that kind of money.
That's right. Don't need that kind of money. And separate yourself from that because that's why it's on the 14th day. Yeah. Can't be confused with the first. Yeah. They're supposed to be kept separate. Now that's the backstory to that. Now the root to all this comes from one mistranslation. Here, we'll just do it this way. Here, Easter search. I'm using my Strong's. If you do a search for Strong's for the word Easter, you're going to find one hit. It's in Acts chapter 12. All right, and what it says, and we're going to go back to verse 3. Well, hell, let's just go all the way to 1. Let's go to the very top. Now, about that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hand and vexed certain of the church. And he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Listen what it says. Then were the days of unleavened bread. So we're talking about time for Passover, right?
Yeah.
All right. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 coordinations of soldiers to keep him, intending that after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Okay. Now, Easter is such a horrible translation here that it has to be intentional. It can't be done intentionally, because if we turn on my Strong's and let you look what it says, all right? All right. Where did Easter go? I got to put on my glasses. There it is. That helps. It's the Passover, the meal, the festival, special sacrifices connected with it, Easter, the Passover. It's Pascha, and it comes from 6463, which is Penska, which means the same thing. All right. So it's an intentional mistranslation. It's so bad because you cannot substitute Anuna, the Queen of Heaven, for the Passover, for the festival of the victim, that we're talking about. So, like I said, the translation is so horrible that it has to be. And it's still connected. Since she's fighting back after all this time, is Isis in the form of Isis in Egypt. She's still creeping around here in contemporary Christianity. Now, the primary pagan philosophies, or this imagery was the rabbit. It's rapid, multiple.
Even if you look at a lot of the island symbols of fertility, they're usually bigger women that are almost egg-shaped. If you look at
they're called Venus figures.
Yeah, they're Venus figures. Yeah.
Now, so that's the story behind it. So really, the translation should read Passover instead of after Passover to bring him forth. Peter therefore was kept in prison, but prayer was made without ceasing for the church unto God for him. Down translate that. The local authorities considered Peter to be a flight risk. Yeah. Locked him up in jail.
4 legions of soldiers around.
Well, no, 4 coordinaries.
4 coordinaries.
It's
okay.
4 groups of 4, so 16 men.
So 16
so
men,
there's still that's a lot.
That's a lot of guards. Yeah.
That's right.
For one
for Peter. They didn't want him going nowhere.
Peter's
that's
like
right.
not normal anyways.
That's right.
Out
That's
of his damn mind.
That's right. So nonetheless, that's where you get the word Easter comes in. So you see one bad translation can screw up so much stuff. Right. And because of it, we dress up our little girls and our little boys in these little nets and put these little baskets with eggs in it and give them these little bunnies and send them off to church. Okay? If you would have did that during the Babylonian time when Ishtar was big, what you would be doing was sending your little boys and girls off to temple Ishtar, prostitution to be a temple prostitute. Dress them up and send them to church. All right? So we got to be careful because people say, "Oh well, we celebrate Jesus on Easter. We don't do that." Well, I don't know if that's how he really feels about it.
No, yeah, this might be a little different.
He just told you to keep the Passover forever, for all generations. All right, and then we turn around and we fighting the same fight we find in the book of Exodus with the same characters. Still, one of them gods kicking back.
1,000 years ago.
Didn't want to go. 1,000 years ago. Still find it here locked up with us.
Same things, yeah.
And the children of Israel have kept that with them. All right, the 13th gate of the gate and the gates in Babylon was the Ishtar Gate. All right. As a matter of fact, if you want to see it, you can get online and find it. It's in the British World Museum in England, or it's the other one.
They actually have it in the museum. Yeah.
They took it there, the parts of it, and then recreated the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's labeled the Ishtar Gate.
The only reason the pyramids are still in Egypt is because Great Britain couldn't lift it.
That's about right. They tried to figure it out.
They tried to. It ain't gonna happen. We're just gonna leave
That's
them
a lot
here.
of blocks. They
We're
started
gonna
doing that,
put
man.
our names on them, but we're just gonna leave them here.
That's a lot of math. Yeah, try to figure out. Yeah. Now I'm gonna go back. Where were we in the book of Exodus? Because I don't think we're gonna stop about right there. Because I've done a lot of talking.
It was a good one, though.
Let's see. I still
I
got.
learned a lot about Passover, so.
Well, we're not done with it quite.
No.
Exodus.
most definitely be
We were
more
chapter
traditional
12.
next year.
What? What were we? Chapter 12. What? I'm gonna know where we were. I don't know. We'll figure it out though. We'll be back next week in chapter 12 somewhere. Oh yeah, I didn't even get down to what I wanted to. Then we'll get to that next time. No problem. That's good.
I think we're on 16.
I think that's something like that. That's what I was thinking too. Is somewhere in there.
We did
There should be a covenant, right?
15 is what we're on, actually. Maybe.
7 days. Yeah, that's somewhere in there. We'll go with 15. That'll work.
Yeah.
Guys, have a good night.